Hello and welcome to Time of Death. I'm your host, Dee,
And I'm Ris.
and tonight we're here to really tell you some probably the most twisted case that I've encountered thus far.
I'm very excited to hear.
Yes, I gave mom some spoilers. I did not give you any.
I know,
Um,
no matter how much I try to get you to talk to me, you won't,
yes, it's I'm Fort Knox when it comes to these cases.
apparently.
So, Riss, do you want to give them your usual spiel?
Yes, I can. For those of you who are new here, welcome. We are Time of Death. We are a podcast that consists of two nurses. We have medical and psychiatric experience, and we like to delve into true crime cases that either focus around medical professionals or have a significant medical background. So, this is episode 17, Dee's case, and we are going to head right in 17, right?
Yeah. It's I'm like can say that confidently with 80% certainty. So, for this case, I am a purist, so I do have a piece of paper or papers, I
Mhm.
should say, with the case. So if you hear any like weird pages turning, it's just I'm shuffling, I'm dribbling, shuffling, doing my thing. So, let's get into it. Okay. So, we have some international listeners. Shout out to you.
Shout out.
Wink, wink.
Mm.
So I wanted to cover this case. It kind of stumbled in my lap. I was scrolling through Facebook because I am a true-hearted millennial.
Yeah, Facebook is becoming a little bit more obsolete these days, I feel like.
Listen, I've been rocking with Facebook since 2011, so you cannot tell me nothing, okay?
Oh my god.
Facebook is a constant. Had the MySpace back in the day,
I remember.
my little scene phase
Mhm.
MySpace with the promiscuous girl playing as my
Iconic.
I truly what was the name? Lady D. I think it
Lady D.
Lady D.
And it had all the like
Oh, yeah.
uh what's that called? The
Little
cryptic
symbol.
at symbol for an A.
Dude, I was in 8th grade and I was wild.
Lady D.
Lady D. That should be the new code name for me, like, "Hey, we are rocking with Lady D and Riz." But anyways, on a more serious note, so I was scrolling and I stumbled across this case because the algorithm is alive and well, about the bedsit murders.
Mhm. Never heard of it.
So, I'm about to give you the 411 on the sitch, and we will get into it.
All right, I'm ready.
So, the bedsit murders, and shout out to all our international gals and guys from England.
Oh, okay.
There's like 3 of you. So, shout out to those 3.
Shout out. We love you.
We love you.
Love forever.
Uh, so, the bedsit murders was a cold case for 3 decades.
Mm.
It was actually one of the United Kingdom's longest unsolved double homicide.
Double.
And due to advancements made in technology, the killer was identified, which helped a depraved monster be held responsible for his crime.
Good. That's what I like to hear.
Yeah. Trigger warning, this is very disturbing. This is actually, I think, the most disturbing case that I have encountered personally.
Mm.
So I think that is definitely saying something. There are fortunately no baby murderers in this tale.
Good.
It's still pretty twisted.
So if that's not for you tonight, then we'll just see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Riss. So this takes place in Turnbridge Wells in Kent, this part of the United Kingdom, and this has a population of about 50,000 people. It's a quiet town, quaint, picturesque, what you normally would picture of like cute little England. In this town, June 23rd, 1987, 25-year-old Wendy Nell is found in her apartment. She had spent the previous night with her fiance, his name is Ian Plass, and they had stayed at his apartment. So I guess she did not go to work that next morning. and they were concerned, so they did, like, their kind of a wellness check and called her fiancé, Ian, and he went to her apartment, and he's like, "What's going on, Wendy?" So, I guess he had looked through a window and saw her in bed, so he, like, was calling, like, trying everything he can to get her to open the door. He figured she was sick,
Mhm.
was concerned for her safety, so he went in and he found her body.
Oh, no. Wait, so they were together the night before, she had slept over his house, and then in the morning.
She had gone back to her apartment, I guess,
Okay.
and she did not come
Go to work that
to
day?
work.
Okay.
So that was, like, the red flag. So he found her body, bloody, battered, naked, and she had been strangled. The coroner found that she had been sexually assaulted after her death as well.
Postmortem, she was assaulted?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was no signs of forced entry, and that led the investigators to believe that the killer had entered through, like, a window, and he just waited for Wendy to come home.
Mm.
So, what I thought was also very bizarre is that her killer took her diary that she had at home. They really didn't find much in terms of evidence. They did have one fingerprint and a shoe print. However, there were really no other leads. The town was very scared, and it was, like, very unprecedented for something like this to happen in this town.
Mhm.
Like, it was, like, your typical small town kind of vibe,
Yeah.
and this poor girl is brutally murdered. So, in November, specifically the 24th, the same year, 1987, 20-year-old Caroline Pierce was abducted from her apartment, and she lived 1 mile away from Wendy's house.
Mm.
So, neighbors reported hearing screams around midnight, and 3 weeks later, after she was a missing person, her body was found in Grosvenor Park, which is located in Turnbridge Wells. She was found in a drainage ditch. She was also naked, bloody, strangled, and she had been sexually assaulted after death.
Okay.
So, police in this case highly suspected that the same killer had murdered both of these girls. This was the same kind of MO. The two girls even look alike. They're both brunette. And the killer had taken their keychains as souvenirs.
And the first girl's diary. So
Yes.
he likes mementos.
Well, this is the thing. So I think there might be another reason he took the diary, but we'll get more into that.
Okay.
But he had taken these keychains specifically as souvenirs. Both of the girls, Wendy and Caroline, worked on the same street. They lived a mile apart. They were in their 20s. They had dark hair. And they had both reported a prowler shortly before their murders.
So both of them said, "Oh, we have someone, like, shady walking around."
Yeah, they had reported that there was someone, like, prowling around their building.
That's
And
interesting that both of them reported it.
yeah, and some of Wendy's neighbors also reported seeing a prowler around her apartment.
Mm.
So, unfortunately, there were really no leads for the case. The trail went cold, and there were no suspects identified, no arrests made. So it's kind of an end.
Yeah, just up in the air.
34 years go by, and during their case, both Wendy and Caroline, they were obviously sexually assaulted postmortem, and DNA samples had been obtained from both of
Mm.
their bodies. In 1986, literally 1 year before this happened, DNA was introduced as evidence. If these two murders had taken place the year before, they may have not collected this DNA,
Mm.
which ends up being instrumental in catching this killer. So the timing, I think, was powerful,
Mhm.
and I think it was just something that they didn't really understand at that point, but they knew at some point DNA was going to be something that was invaluable in a lot of these investigations.
Was Caroline sexually assaulted too? Postmortem
They both
as
were.
well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, just some of my own independent research that I looked this up. In 1995, the UK established its national DNA database. Before that, yes, they would collect DNA from the cases, but now they had something to compare a lot of these samples to. So, especially like repeat offenders, this was something that was critically important because you can connect or collect all the DNA that you want. If you're not able to identify the person,
Mhm.
it's not helpful. So, this database was a huge step throughout the world
Yeah.
in helping bring justice to not only Caroline and Wendy, a lot of other victims.
And you can connect those cases from case you know what I mean? Like, you can see the
Mhm.
same DNA is present for both Caroline and
Absolutely.
Wendy.
hmm So, in 1999, they were able to create a full DNA profile of the killer. However, there was no DNA to link it to other cases in that same database that we just mentioned.
Mhm.
And in 2019, they were able to identify potential relatives of the individual whose DNA they had collected, and it came down to 19 people.
Wow.
So, slowly but surely, they chipped away and they were able to create, like, sequence his whole genome, and then, okay, we're cutting it down to 1,000 and then 19. So they're working their way down to really get this to the one guy
Mm.
who did this. So, I wanna introduce David Fuller at this time. David, in 2019, is a 66-year-old man. He's a dad. He has 3 kids. He just seems like a normal guy. He watches birds in his spare time. He's a bird watcher. He's interested in photography. He's a cyclist, and at that time was a retired electrician at Kent and Sussex Hospital, as well as previously working at Turnbridge Wells Hospital. So, I watched the body cam video where the police enter this individual's house, David's house, and they charge him or arrest him for the murder of Caroline and Wendy. And this was in his home in Heathsville, which is about 40 miles away from Turnbridge Wells. So he denied murdering the 2 girls. However, DNA linked him to both murders with a certainty of 1 billion to 1. So this is clearly the guy.
Mhm.
Plus, his fingerprint was a positive match to the fingerprint that was found at Wendy's apartment. I think this was really cool. They were also able to identify the same tread of the shoe found at Wendy's apartment to pictures of him from the 80s
Mm.
wearing these shoes.
Oh my goodness.
So it was
That's
like
like
a
from a
very
movie.
high tech kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of software involved, and they were able to do that. And I thought that was so cool and
That
interesting.
is cool. You know what? I was listening to a true crime podcast that I like, Rotten Mango. I probably have brought her up before because I love her. But she was talking about the other day how there are podiatrists that work with the FBI to solve murders and other crimes. And they are able to look at footprints and like match it up with a gait to see how someone's walking, like if they walk with a limp or if, like that, those kinds of tiny details that you don't really think about. And it goes really in depth. But I was like, wow, they have like podiatrists that focus on that.
Sherlock Holmes also does that.
Sherlock Holmes is like a jack of all trades.
It's true. Well, while they were investigating his home, they also found a receipt from 1984 to Buster Brown's, which is the restaurant where Caroline worked. He's either the biggest packer there ever was, or he's keeping that as a souvenir.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's not a coincidence.
No. He also had pictures from Super Snaps, which was the store that Wendy worked at during the time of her murder.
Hmm.
So, also something important to note, David had been part of a cycling club, and a route that they would take on this club outing was through the park where Caroline's body had been dumped. So there's a lot of, I mean, besides the billion to one certainty, there's a lot of coincidence.
Mhm.
Uh, quote, quote, what is this? What is this?
I
Italics?
usually say, like, quote, unquote,
Quote, unquote, with my little gesture of my
"little
hand.
bunny
Little
fingers."
bunny fingers. Coincidence linking this guy. So, let's jump back to the diary thing. Wendy's diary went missing. So, this is someone that A, knew she had a freaking diary, and she clearly had some kind of encounter with him
Oh, that's what
that
my first thought was. I was
yeah,
like, "Oh, maybe she's, like, written about him, and that's why he doesn't want that found." And then I was like, "Oh, maybe it's just a memento." But yeah, that makes sense too.
because if he was stalking her, he went to her place of work, he had contact with her. These guys tend to escalate.
Mhm.
And I think that he was very nervous and paranoid about what would be said in this diary. When you're committing this crime of passion, you don't have time to sit here and pour through this book either.
Mm.
So, to err on the side of caution, he takes it. So, parallel to his own life, in his home, while the police are investigating him for their murder, 30 odd years later, they find diary entries of his own, which are detailing roughly 30 stalking, prowlery, burglaries that he did over the years.
Oh, boy.
So he's someone that journals, is an avid writer, journaler, whatever. And I think that was another reason that he was so adamant about taking Wendy's diary.
Mm.
He lived on the same street as Wendy during that time.
Oh.
So this evidence clearly links him to both women. However, this is not the most disturbing part of the case. While the police were investigating, or constables, or whatever they're called in England, while they're investigating and going through his home, they find a collection. And in this collection, it's videos, photos, journals, all of which is chronicling him sexually abusing the female corpses in the morgues of the two hospitals that he worked.
So these are not Wendy and Caroline's murders. These are separate from when he was in the morgue? When he was working in the morgue of him sexually assaulting corpses?
Yeah. It's it's absolutely when I was reading that, I was just like I could not like, I had to read it multiple times because I couldn't fathom
Yeah.
that someone would literally go and defile these bodies of these victims for their own perverse pleasure. And I think it's also very important to note that both Wendy and Caroline were sexually assaulted after
Yeah.
their deaths. So, clearly we're dealing with a necrophile,
Mhm.
which is the lowest of the low. They found videos on mobile phones, more than 100 hard drives, 2,200 floppy disks, 30 SIM cards, 1,300 CDs, DVDs, and 3,400 photographs.
So he must have been doing this for a long time.
Too long. And
Yeah.
I'm sure it was even much longer than anyone thinks.
Wow.
So I saw a picture of all the evidence that they had collected, and it legitimately filled up a room. There are roughly 14 million indecent images in total. One of the mothers of the victims was actually apprehended for trying to kill David
Wow.
upon learning that he did that to her daughter's body after she had passed away. I guess Ezra had fallen off of a bridge in some freak accident, and when her mom found out, she was beyond devastated. Not only do you lose your daughter, but then to find out that someone in this institution that you're supposed to trust did that to her body.
And you know what? That must be so difficult because you've gone through the grieving process, you've accepted. I mean, you never really move on from that, but you've kind of accepted that they've passed, and then you find out that their body was defiled,
Mhm.
especially at an institution. Yes, like you pointed out, that their best interests are always supposed to be honored even after their death.
Absolutely.
That's just terrible.
It is. I was very disturbed, and, I can't imagine how that mother must have felt. I can't. I also watched a video of his interrogation, And during that time, David refuses to say exactly what he did. He just keeps going like, "Oh, I admit to the offenses." And he will not say like, "Yes, I sexually assaulted these poor bodies." Like he is trying to distance himself
Mhm.
from the act. And they ask him point blank what he did, and he says yes, like he did it, but at that point you really can't there's over 14 million images. You can't argue that.
No, that's damning evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. However, during that time, he is admitting to sexually assaulting the bodies, but he never admits to murdering these 2 girls.
Mm.
So I just wanna give respect to the victims, all of them, Caroline, Wendy, but also the victims in the morgue as well. Those victims were all female, ranging from age 9
Wow.
to 100,
Oh my god.
and these are just the people that we know about that are on those videos. These victims range from 2008 to 2020.
Oh my goodness.
However, he was working in the hospitals as an electrician since 1999.
Mhm.
So it's very suspicious that there are many more victims besides those that he's actually documented.
Mhm.
The reason that he even had access to the morgue as an electrician was that he needed to be able to work on the refrigerators. And the morgue staff that were there on like day shift would leave at 4 p.m. and the next shift would come in at 7 p.m. So that gave David 3 hours alone with the victims.
So the murders of Wendy and Caroline occurred in 1987.
Mhm.
So this is before he started with the more crimes.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So that probably was a big draw for him to work in the hospital setting.
He probably like got a taste for it
Mhm.
and then found the best place that he could do it, as disgusting as that sounds.
Yeah, the act where he would have the most access.
Mhm.
He would enter through the utility room of the morgues, which is ironically, or intentionally, I should say, where they had no cameras. So he would slip in undetected,
Mhm.
leave undetected, and obviously, where he was in the morgue, there were no cameras out of respect to the bodies.
Mhm.
David admitted to looking up the victims on Facebook after he would assault them.
Mhm.
He said that he would enjoy seeing the families post, saying how much they missed their loved one.
He
And
sounds like such a he is a sick individual, and he likes to revisit and reminisce on these crimes and these women.
mm, they actually, the investigators, they created an operation called Operation Sandpiper in order to help identify victims of David. This cost roughly 2.5 million pounds, and the same software is used to identify victims in natural disasters.
Mm.
So there's roughly 150,000 hours of video, which, keep in mind, took computers, which are working 24/7, around 10 months to
Mm.
sift through. So far, 82 out of the 102 victims that were recorded have been identified.
102? Oh my god.
However, because how they're identifying people, they're relying on like tattoos and scars and etc. to better help come up with positive IDs.
Mhm.
However, as we know, there's so far 20 people that have not been able to be identified due to lack of distinctive
Yeah.
identifiers. And because of that, unfortunately, there are some names who will never be known. December 15th, 2021, David admitted to the assaults, however, denied the murders. And on November 14th, 2022, about a year ago, he changed his plea from not guilty to guilty
Okay.
and received 2 life sentences for the murders of Wendy and Caroline. I want to just give a little insight into how Wendy and Caroline were described by their loved ones to give them the respect that they deserve. Wendy was described as successful, happy, and independent. She had a significant other named Ian that she was engaged to, and Caroline was lively and trying to find her place in the world.
Oh.
So she was only 20.
Mm.
So David received the 2 life sentences for both of the girls. However, he only received 12 years for the mortuary abuse.
How long?
12.
Oh my god.
Just nothing. Nothing.
Over 100 sexual assaults, and he received 12 years for that. That's just
So I just wanted to let everyone know that this case showed
mm,
me that monsters do exist. There's a documentary about this called Monster in the Morgue,
mm,
which I thought was very appropriate.
very aptly named.
And yeah, this was just terrible reading about and watching the videos on ends and the interrogation and all that, just the lack of accountability. David also did plead like their version of criminally insane, but however, he had no history of mental illness except in 2010, where he felt a little depressed because his likes were hurting him.
Okay.
So he's not only a necrophile, he's a pedophile. Some of
Mhm.
these kids were 9 years old.
Yeah.
They're also assaulting these 100-year-old women. Never mind that they're dead bodies. Their loved one, the last
Mhm.
remains on earth
Yeah.
of these people's loved ones. It was just like I felt disgusting after reading this.
You know what? It's crazy to me because I know, like, in my ER, we treat every deceased person with such respect
Mhm.
and dignity. Like, we try to honor them, and family comes in, and obviously it's a devastating experience for them. And to think that they're brought to the morgue after that and then sexually assaulted at that point by a monster like this guy is just it's baffling to me, and it's just so it's kind of incomprehensible to me because it's
Mhm.
just complete disregard for their life, for all their value, you know what I mean? It's heartbreaking.
It is, I agree, and, I don't blame the mom for wanting to hurt David
No.
because he hurt her in a way that a lot of people hopefully cannot understand.
And you know what? It's terrible to think about how after this sexual assault postmortem took place, they were likely released to
Mhm.
a funeral home, and their bodies may have been put on, a display at a wake and a funeral.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just you're seeing their body and you're honoring that body, and
Mhm. Tainted.
it's just been tainted. So I don't know. I can't even understand that, but I can't imagine.
So I just wanna give everyone some safe space. This was a very emotionally upsetting case. So have a have a nice cup of tea,
Mhm.
cuddle your cat or your dog or your boyfriend, girlfriend, mom, brother, friend, whoever, and just and
Relax, yeah.
relax. And it really does help you recognize that we're very fortunate. And it's also a little scary because there are people who have no regard for others.
Mm-mm.
And there's no respect for the dead. We're victimized all over.
Mhm.
So just give yourself some little TLC tonight.
Mm. Thank you, Dee. You did very well delivering that, even though that was very upsetting.
I'm gonna call it. The time is 19. Oh wait, could not do the math. Could not do
Just
the
add
math.
the number to
I
12.
no anyways, on that note, 1908, that's 7:08 for all you non-military, non-medical folks. Just wanna say good night. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to like, review, rate, subscribe.
And we'll see you next week.
We'll see you
Bye.
next week. Bye.